Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today, if you're particularly observant, you'll notice from my new background, I'm not actually in my usual location in West London. I'm in fact in Bangkok. The reason I'm in Bangkok is that I'm visiting my son, who decided last year, he and his partner decided that despite the fact they had very good jobs, they decided that really wasn't much future for them in the UK and decided to move here. They in London had a very tiny but very nice flat, and a huge chunk of their income was going in rent. And so they moved here, where they are living in, I would say, some considerable luxury in a very, very nice flat, and are just paying a small fraction of their incomes in rent, and for the first time ever able to actually save money. And I think they both seem to think that after being here for getting on for almost a year now, that this is the best decision they ever made. And neither of them has any wish or intention to return to the UK. Now, one of the things, and I've only been here for 4 or 5 days, one of the things about travelling, and especially when you travel quite a long way, is that you have a new perspective when looking at what's happening in the UK and so on. And so it's been for me that, despite the fact that I'm still sourcing all my news from the BBC and online and from various online newspapers and Twitter and all the rest of it, you kind of see things slightly differently. And I was thinking the other day, when you look at the world at large and what is going on and how many threats we're facing, when you look at the war in Ukraine that's dragging on and on, is hardly ever mentioned these days in the news, you look at what's going on in Gaza, and you look at what's going on in the Red Sea, and how we, of course, we're following along behind the Americans, we're involved in that. When you see how all these things are affecting world trade and inflation, and how so many economies are really suffering at the moment, and then I think almost one of the biggest threats of all is the possibility of Trump becoming president. A truly frightening prospect, which has every possibility of Putin just being given Ukraine, because Trump isn't going to support the Ukrainians, and he's, as we all know, a completely reckless, dishonest, and corrupt individual who's only interested in his own future, the way that Boris Johnson was. And then you look at the UK and you see what difficulties we have for the economy doing so badly, how so many people are suffering, experiencing poverty, and how there's that general atmosphere of anxiety and worry about the future and so on. You look at the strikes, and you look at the public services, look at the NHS, look at the care services, look at transport, look at prisons, look at the courts, look at the police. Everywhere you look, because of shortage of money mostly, there are these problems. And it's interesting that with all that background and all those things going on throughout the world, the big story the last couple of days, the biggest story here all over the BBC, has been about a man who went to visit his wife in hospital, who had some abdominal surgery, some non-life-threatening abdominal surgery. And you think, really, have we got our priorities right? And the second big story, of course, is the story which has dominated British politics for the last 12 months. The really big issue of these little boats that bring these people across the channel, who Sunak is so determined to stop, because it's the only one of his pledges that he's got any chance of delivering on. That he's forever saying us how one of his pledges was to bring down inflation, something of which he had little or no control, and being as dishonest in the tradition of Johnson. He was claiming only this week that thanks to government measures and government decisions, that we managed to reduce inflation from 11% to 4%, nothing to do with him whatsoever. And when you look at the immense amount of time that is being wasted on this small boat issue, when there are so much more important matters to deal with, And the cost of it was already, what, 400 million of cost. But not only the cost of the actual money being paid out to Rwanda, the amount of time, civil servants' time, hundreds, maybe thousands of civil servants working on this endlessly on trying to stop these little boats, which they won't succeed with anyway. And there's also very little chance that these boats, these flights will ever take off to Rwanda. Apart from anything else, there's very little time. It's almost certainly going to be a Labour government within a year, and a Labour government has already said they'll reverse the policy. They'll scrap the whole Rwandan thing. Might even, who knows, might even bring back those who've already been sent, if any do get sent. But it seems extremely unlikely that anybody's going to be sent to Rwanda. And when you look at how so many of our problems are problems of not having enough money, you need more money for this, more money for everything. And what is the government telling us? What is Jeremy Hunt telling us? They're going to cut taxes. They're going to reduce the amount of money they have available, because this is how you get elected. You lie and you give tax cuts you can't afford in order to get elected. I mean, heaven help us. You hear Sunak every time he gets up. He used to talk about 28 billion because Labour said some time ago they can spend 28 billion a year on green issues and in order to try and stimulate the economy. They then backtracked to say that it would be 28 billion if and when they could afford it. And Sunak, all he ever says is, they haven't told you where this 28 billion is coming from. On and on and on about it. And of course it fools people. People leave all this stuff. You know, when you get one guy on television all the time, Sunak, parroting, and all his psychics parroting this rubbish, and people do believe it. And of course you've got the Daily Mail and the Daily Express and the Sun are all supporting the government and what they're saying. And I saw an old woman on the television being interviewed, I think it was yesterday, the day before, and she's being asked about the small boats issue. And like millions of others, she said, yes, there are too many people here. We're already full. We haven't got room for any more people. We must look after our own. This is an old woman. She must have been in her 70s or something. Within a few years, she's going to need more and more medical attention. She'll end up in a care home, or she'll end up needing someone to come into her home every day to feed her or bathe her or whatever. But she doesn't think about that. She just thinks about people telling us all the time that we're full up. We haven't got room for any more. We've got rid of all these Europeans. Well, there are very few European people ever coming to the UK to work these days. Those who were already here for various reasons stayed. But having got rid of the Europeans, we had a big problem, a shortage of workers. And so, particularly for key industries like the health service and so on, the government started advertising all over the world for replacements to come. And those replacements, because they're coming from the other side of the world, they wanted to bring their families with them. And so we had this huge surge in immigration. The whole thing about the referendum was to stop immigration from the EU, because it was unfair that these people were coming from the EU to use our National Health Service. No one thought about whether they were working or not and contributing it, paying taxes. No, they were coming. They might have been using the NHS. So we had to stop that. We put a stop to all that. And then suddenly we found with this huge shortage of workers. And so we started advertising all around the world for people to come. And then people started flooding in. And then, of course, when it was seen that there was this huge increase in net immigration, it was decided to, the Daily Express pointed out, and the government had to respond by saying, we've got to do something to stop this. So what did they do? They first of all said that the minimum wage you'd have to have before you actually came to this country, you'd have to have a job guaranteeing you £39,000 a year. Then they found that was a bit too much. They cut that down to about £29,000 a year. So you have to have a job before you come here from Bangladesh or Nigeria or India or wherever. You have to have a job earning £29,000 a year. quite difficult anyway, because that's slightly less than a doctor earns. And if you want to come here because you want to do some basic job in care or whatever, the sort of jobs that we need people to do, you can't really. And also what they've said now is that you cannot bring your dependents anymore. So all these people, for example, these women that perhaps in the third world who want to come to work in the UK, can't bring the dependents. They can leave their husbands and children behind, or the husbands can leave their wives and children behind. Leave their families, come here, have a job already before they get here, earning £29,000 a year. And they think that's going to work. Well, of course it will work, in as much it will very much reduce immigration, and it will result in even bigger shortages of workers. I mean, it's not that difficult to actually link all this up. You know, you stop people coming, and you've got jobs that need doing, and the people can't come to do the jobs. Therefore, you're going to have a shortage of people doing those jobs, and that's going to cause more problems. It's also, you know, as I say, every week, it's so crazy, so absolutely crazy. And yet everything, as you can see, it's all geared around, can the Tories get elected again? Can they by promising tax cuts and by promising to be really, really hard on these on immigration, and to be really, really tough on all these people, these boat people, these desperate people who cross the Channel because they've got no other way of coming to the UK, but they might have very good reason for wanting to come to the UK, nowhere they come through legal routes, and they have to be stopped. And it's 40,000 people a year. And last year, net immigration was 700,000. It's a tiny drop, and yet this is the focus of everybody's attention. Watching the news from here, this is the focus of attention. It's the boats. Look at the debate last week. Look at the hours and hours. You know, the thousands, hundreds of thousands of hours of civil servants' time and politicians' time, all working on this focusing on this one issue, because that might get the Daily Express and it might get the Daily Mail backing the government and helping them get re-elected. It's a crazy, crazy, crazy world. But that's how it looks from here. I suppose it looks the same from anywhere, but I did find it extraordinary that the big focus was William going to visit Kate and Sunak in his small boats. Anyway, I'll keep watching. I'm going to try to post a video pretty sure in the next 2 or 3 weeks that I'm going to be here. And in the meantime, we'll see what happens next week. If you've watched this far, thank you very much indeed. And until next time, bye for now.